With Republican primary voting set to begin in under 2 weeks, new polling shows that Donald Trump still holds a commanding lead over his opponents. According to new national numbers from USA Today and Suffolk University, Trump leads the field with 62% of support from registered GOP voters. In second, a whopping 49 points behind the former president is former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley. She's at 13. She's followed by Florida Governor Ron DeSantis at 10, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy at 6, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie at 4. In a hypothetical general election matchup, the poll shows Trump virtually tied with President Joe Biden. He's up 44 to 43, but that's within the margin of error. That's a tie. When third-party candidates are included as options, though, Trump lead grows slightly, 37% to 34%, RFK Jr. at 10, but again, even that 3-point margin within the poll's margin of error. Joining us now, politics reporter from Semafor, Dave Weigel. Dave, good to see you this morning.
Good to be here.
You've had a recent piece for Semafor that details several key dates for this year's election cycle. Give us one or two that you think are really going to matter that maybe we're overlooking as the potential for something newsworthy or a surprise.
Well, in early March, the first week of March, you're going to have Super Tuesday. You're going to have the first clutch of big states. That's going to end whatever primary that we're in at that point for the presidential race. It's also going to kick off the Senate races, House races, I would think have been undercovered amidst everything else going on. You're going to see whether Democrats have to spend tens of millions of dollars against each other in a California Senate race, or whether they get one Republican, one Democrat in a top two system. You're going to see whether Lauren Boebert survives. So you've got a kind of bifurcated calendar here where there is a presidential primary that might wrap up very soon, and then the election for everything else picking up a very long 6-month primary season that everyone's going to turn their attention to right after.
So we just ran through some national polls, and obviously it's not a national election, it's a state-by-state one, but Trump commanding lead. You've spent a lot of time on the ground in Iowa and New Hampshire. What's your sense of the electorate in those two states for the GOP?
It is the polling that you just saw. The national polling is very close to what you're seeing in Iowa. The only discrepancy is there is more of a ground game there for Ron DeSantis, built by Never Back Down. There is one for Nikki Haley, built by Americans Prosperity. They are doing better in Iowa than they're doing in those national trial heats. But Iowa is very tough for Trump to lose right now. He's in a more commanding position than any Republican has been in that primary. You can compare it to George Bush in 2000. You can compare it to George H.W. in 1980. There's not much precedent for how well he's doing. New Hampshire is the competitive primary. Nothing else on the calendar in the next month is as close, and that is largely because of non-affiliated voters in New Hampshire, independents, the sort of people that Chris Sununu is personally appealing to, for Democrats who've switched their party registration, some of whom I've met in New Hampshire, who just want to slow Trump down. So Iowa's next, but there is a sense when you talk to Republicans that New Hampshire is the one that Donald Trump is worried about. If you look at the campaign spending, even over the last few days, that is where the Trump campaign, their PACs are starting to attack Haley.
But what sort of margin? I mean, we certainly think that Trump's still favored there.
Right.
You know, I mean, what chances do you give Haley of like pulling the upset and actually winning, or coming in a close enough second that she'd have any shot going forward? Because South Carolina, as she likes to note, is next. That's her home state.
Right.
But Trump might obliterate her there.
He might, and there's an entire month where, imagine the best case scenario for Haley right now, which is coming in second in Iowa, knocking out Ron DeSantis. Not that he would have to drop out, but it'd be very hard for him to continue after that. Then winning New Hampshire. I think if she won New Hampshire, there are a lot of people who don't follow politics that regularly would find out, oh, somebody beat Donald Trump in a primary. I'm going to pay attention to her. But the South Carolina electorate is very conservative. Evangelicals who love Donald Trump, the governor, and a lot of legislatures in the state have endorsed him. Yes, the scenario you set up is very difficult for Trump's opponents to get past. How do you win that state with a month of just Donald Trump dominating the news, spending money, attacking one person? You've already seen how they're starting to attack her. It's immigration, it's tax rates. There's a bunch of stuff in the quiver that they haven't used against Haley. When Haley's arguments against Trump, she's had counterattacks, she's had comebacks. But all of them are just pushing the stone up the hill and running out of room because Trump is so popular with Republican voters.
So let's talk the Democratic side. Later this month, President Biden will not appear on the primary ballot in New Hampshire. Was this effort to change the calendar, but New Hampshire kind of said no. Yeah. But there's a movement underway to vote for him as a write-in candidate. Tell me how that's going. What should we glean into that?
It's going well for them. There's been just a little bit of polling in New Hampshire. There'll be more the next week. And the option of writing in Biden is winning. It's got a 50 to 60% in polling, depending how you ask about it. It's not a hard name to spell. It's a very well known name. There is a grassroots effort created in the last few months by Democratic strategists in the state. They don't have or need that much money. They're trying to raise maybe $1 million, less than $1 million to do the entire thing. Just inform registered New Hampshire Democrats. You can show up, you can write in Biden, you can end this primary, and we can get on to beating Donald Trump. The Dean Phillips campaign, which is remaining in New Hampshire, campaigning across the state, it has not picked up a lot of Democrats, as worried as they are about about Biden's electability. It has not broken through. There is just a reluctance among Democrats just to make the primary elongated and threaten Biden and make him campaign further for this. There is an attitude you find when you talk to Democrats there of how soon can we wrap this up?
Yeah, and then on to South Carolina for the first official primary, where both the president and the vice president are going to be spending a lot of time to make a decisive victory. And let's get this over with. Semaphores, Dave Weigel, thank you. And of course, we'll be hearing from the president this afternoon in an important speech on American democracy delivered from Valley Forge. We'll bring you complete coverage of that. Thanks to all of you for getting up way too early with us on this Friday morning and all week long. Morning Joe starts right now.